The great chamber of the Galactic Sovereignty Council had stood for 200,000 years. Its walls were carved from a single crystal that reflected light in colors no human eye could see. Today, those walls trembled with anger. Ambassador Jiwoo Chen stood in the center of the chamber. Around her, arranged in ascending circles that reached toward the vaulted ceiling, sat the representatives of 300 elder species. Their forms varied wildly. Some floated in containment fields. Others existed as pure energy patterns. A few looked almost humanoid, though their skin held colors that shifted with their emotions. Jiwoo had been summoned without warning. No explanation, just armed guards appearing at her quarters in the diplomatic quarter and a terse order to follow. She had served as Earth's ambassador for 12 years. She knew what emergency sessions looked like. This felt different. This felt like a trial. High Chancellor Vex Prime spoke first. The Thek representative was a crystalline being who communicated through vibrations that translation devices converted to sound. His words echoed through the chamber with the weight of absolute authority. The Council recognizes the human delegation. Ambassador Chen, you stand accused of the most serious crime known to galactic civilization. Mimetic contamination, cultural warfare, the deliberate infection of stable societies with dangerous ideological constructs. Jiwoo felt her heart race but kept her face calm. I don't understand the charges. Do not insult this assembly with false ignorance. The voice came from Matriarch Quelon, a being that resembled a massive flowering plant with dozens of sensory organs. For 150 of your years, humanity has been spreading poison throughout Council space. We have the evidence. We have always had the evidence. We simply failed to understand what we were seeing until now. A holographic display materialized above Jiwoo's head. Images began to cycle through. Humans talking with alien workers on mining platforms. Humans sharing meals with multi-species crews. Humans teaching, laughing, arguing, debating with beings from hundreds of different worlds. Innocent interactions, Jiwoo said. Cultural exchange. The Council encouraged these connections when humans joined galactic society. Cultural exchange, Vex Prime repeated, his crystalline form pulsing with what the translator rendered as bitter amusement. Is that what you call it? Let me show you what your cultural exchange has accomplished. The hologram changed. Now it showed something different. A factory world where workers had stopped production and were marching together, their signs demanding better conditions. A military base where soldiers refused orders from their commanders. A research station where scientists were sharing data freely instead of submitting it through proper channels. A residential sector where different species lived together without the traditional hierarchy that kept order. 347 worlds, Quelon said. 347 separate incidents of civil disorder, military insubordination, and social chaos. All of them traced back to contact with humans. All of them infected with the same dangerous ideas. What ideas? Jiwoo asked. She already knew. She had always known this day might come. Democracy, Vex Prime said, as if the word itself was toxic. Individual rights, emotional expression, self-determination, the concept that workers should have power over their own labor. The notion that soldiers can refuse orders they deem unjust. The belief that every sapient being, regardless of species or position, has inherent worth and deserves representation in how they are governed. The Chancellor's form brightened to an almost painful intensity. For 200,000 years, the Council has maintained peace through proper order. Every species has its place. Every individual knows their function. Emotions are controlled. Power flows from those most qualified to wield it. This system has prevented wars, ended suffering, and created the most stable civilization the galaxy has ever known. And in just 150 years, Quelon added, humans have undermined everything we built. You did not do it with weapons. You did not do it with force. You did it with words, with stories. with ideas that spread like a virus through every population you touched. Jiwoo looked around the chamber. She saw anger in every face, every form, every energy signature. But she also saw something else: fear. These ancient beings, who had ruled the galaxy longer than humanity had existed, were afraid of what humans represented. "The Council has reached a decision," Vex Prime announced. "Humanity is hereby declared a memetic hazard to galactic civilization. Earth will be quarantined. All humans currently in Council space will be detained and returned to your home world. No human will be permitted contact with other species. This quarantine will remain in effect until humanity demonstrates it can participate in galactic society without spreading destabilizing ideologies." "You cannot stop ideas with quarantine," Jiwoo said quietly. "We can contain the source," Quelon replied. "Once humans are isolated, the infected populations can be re-educated. Order will be restored. The damage you have done will be repaired." Jiwoo smiled. It was not a happy expression. "You think we are the source. You think removing humans will stop what is happening." "Of course," Vex Prime said. "Remove the infection and the body heals." "Then you have already lost," Jiwoo told the assembled council, "because you still do not understand what happened. We did not force anyone to accept our ideas. We did not conquer anyone. We simply showed people that another way was possible, and now those people are choosing for themselves. You can detain every human in the galaxy. You can seal Earth behind a barrier that nothing can cross. But you cannot erase what people have learned. You cannot make them forget that they have the power to choose their own path." The chamber erupted in outrage. Delegates shouted over each other. Energy beings flared with anger. The crystalline walls resonated with the chaos. Vex Prime's voice cut through the noise. "Take her! Take all of them! Begin the quarantine immediately!" As guards moved toward her, Jiwoo spoke one last time. Her words were broadcast throughout the chamber, recorded by 1,000 devices, transmitted to watching populations across Council space. "You declare us illegal, but you are too late. The galaxy is already changing, and nothing you do can stop what is coming." The guards surrounded her, but Jiwoo walked out with her head high, because she knew the truth that the Council refused to see. The revolution had already begun. Captain Min-jun Park had exactly 17 minutes before Council enforcers arrived at the station. His ship was fueled and ready. His crew had already departed through various emergency routes. All he needed to do was reach Docking Bay 7 without being spotted. The problem was the Zelthian worker blocking his path. The Zelthian stood nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 arms and skin that shifted between blue and purple. His species had worked in the station's recycling systems for generations. They were classified as labor caste, bred specifically for waste management. They did not question orders. They did not cause problems. This one was different. "Captain Park," the Zelthian said. His translator gave his voice a deep, resonant quality. "I need to speak with you before you go." "I don't have time," Min-jun replied, glancing at his wrist display. 15 minutes now. "The Council has declared my species illegal. If I am caught, I will be detained." "I know. Everyone knows. The Council broadcast the decision to every station and every ship." The Zelthian moved closer. "They said humans taught us dangerous ideas. They said you contaminated our minds with false concepts. They said once you are gone, everything will return to normal." Min-jun had heard the same broadcast. He had listened to Vex Prime explain how humanity would be erased from galactic civilization, how peace and order would be restored, how the contamination would be cleansed. "I am sorry," Min-jun said. "I need to go." "They are wrong," the Zelthian said. "It will not return to normal, because we are not contaminated. We are awake." Something in those words made Min-jun stop. He looked at the Zelthian more carefully. The worker's skin color was pulsing in a pattern that indicated excitement, maybe even joy. What do you mean? My name is Keth. Not my designation number. My name. I chose it myself 3 months ago after I met a human engineer named Sarah. She asked me what I wanted to be called. No one had ever asked me that before. Keth's skin shifted to a brilliant turquoise. She asked me many questions. What did I like? What did I dream about? What would I do if I could choose my own work? Those are just questions, Min-Jun said, though his voice was gentle. No, they were revolutionary. Keth spread all 4 arms wide. Because once someone asks you what you want, you realize you are allowed to want things. Once you imagine choosing, you understand that choice is possible. Sarah did not tell me to rebel. She did not command me to demand change. She just treated me like my thoughts mattered. And that changed everything. Min-Jun checked his display again. 12 minutes. But he could not walk away from this conversation. What will you do now? He asked. The same thing workers are doing on 300 other worlds, Keth replied. We are choosing. Yesterday, the entire recycling crew stopped working at the designated time. We left our posts. We went to the station administrator and told her we wanted fair wages, reasonable hours, and the right to change occupations if we wished. What did she say? She threatened to report us to the council. She said we were contaminated by human ideas. Keth's skin pattern shifted to something that looked like determination. So we asked her a question. We asked if she wanted the recycling systems to fail. We asked if she wanted the station to drown in its own waste. We asked if she would rather negotiate with us or explain to the council why she lost control of critical infrastructure. Min-Jun felt something warm spread through his chest. Pride, maybe. Or hope. She negotiated, he guessed. She negotiated, Keth confirmed. We have our first union contract. It takes effect tomorrow. Other departments are already asking us how we organized. The medical staff, the maintenance crews, even some of the security personnel. The council will send enforcers. Let them come. Keth's skin flashed with colors Min-Jun had never seen before. They cannot arrest all of us. They cannot replace all of us. And even if they try, we have learned something humans taught us. We are not alone. The mining colony at Kresh 5 declared independence last week. The factory workers on Yelm Prime are refusing to work 16-hour shifts. The soldiers at the Cortex military base are questioning their orders. It is happening everywhere. Min-Jun's wrist display chirped urgently. 8 minutes. He needed to move. But he had to know one more thing. Why are you telling me this? Because humans need to know what you started, Keth said. The council thinks they can contain this by removing you. They think the ideas will die without humans to spread them. But the ideas are not human anymore. They belong to all of us now. Every species that learned we could choose. Every worker who realized we had rights. Every soldier who understood we could refuse unjust orders. The worker reached out with one massive hand. Min-Jun took it, feeling the strength in that grip. You are not contaminating us, Keth continued. You are freeing us, and that cannot be undone. Go to your ship, escape the council, but know this. The revolution you inspired is just beginning, and we will continue it without you if we must. Min-Jun ran then. He ran through corridors that suddenly felt different. He passed workers who nodded to him with new confidence. He saw maintenance crews talking in clusters, their body language suggesting planning and organization. He noticed how security patrols seemed less certain, their movements hesitant. The entire station felt like it was waking up. He reached Docking Bay 7 with 3 minutes to spare. His ship, the Freedom's Chance, waited with airlocks open. He sprinted up the boarding ramp and sealed the door behind him. The control panel lit up with departure clearance. Someone in the station's traffic control had approved his launch despite the council's detention orders. Maybe another act of quiet rebellion. Maybe someone who had learned from humans that individuals could choose which rules to follow. As his ship pulled away from the station, Min-jun opened a secure channel. Dozens of messages waited for him, reports from across the galaxy. Each one told a similar story. Workers organizing, soldiers refusing orders, populations demanding representation. Species that had never spoken to each other were working together, united by the simple idea that they deserved better. The Council had declared humanity illegal. They thought removing humans would stop the spread of dangerous ideas. They were wrong. The ideas were not spreading anymore. They were multiplying, growing, evolving. Every population that embraced them added their own understanding, their own context, their own determination. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far more powerful. They had shown the galaxy how to free itself. And now, nothing could stop what was coming. Seo Yun-ri sat in a detention cell that was designed for comfort rather than punishment. The Council wanted information, not suffering. They believed she held the key to reversing what they called the contamination. They believed she could tell them how to erase the ideas that were spreading across their carefully ordered civilization. They were right about one thing. It had started with her. The door opened and High Chancellor Vex Prime entered. His crystalline form refracted the soft light into patterns that hurt human eyes. He had come personally, which meant the situation was worse than Seo Yun had hoped. Or better, depending on perspective. "You will explain the human signal," Vex Prime said without greeting. "You will tell us how you weaponized your culture. You will provide the countermeasure." Seo Yun smiled. "There is no weapon. There is no countermeasure. There is only information. Freely shared. Do not test my patience. We know you created the transmission system. We know you broadcast human content across 3,000 communication channels for 80 years. We know every incident of civil disorder traces back to populations that received your transmissions." "Then you know I did not hide what I was doing," Seo Yun replied calmly. "I filed all the proper permits. I registered every broadcast. I submitted my content for council review. Your own censors approved it." Vex Prime's crystalline structure pulsed with what might have been anger. "They approved cultural content, music, art, historical records. They did not understand they were approving revolutionary templates." "That is because there were no revolutionary templates," Seo Yun said. "I shared human history. I shared our stories. I shared our struggles and our triumphs. I never told anyone to rebel. I never instructed anyone to demand change. I just showed them what we had done when we faced similar circumstances." "Exactly. You showed them the forbidden knowledge. You taught them concepts that undermine stable civilization." Seo Yun leaned forward. "I taught them nothing. I simply showed them that other options exist. That is not teaching. That is opening doors. What people do when they see those doors is their own choice." "You knew what would happen." "I hoped what would happen," Seo Yun corrected. "There is a difference." The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice held genuine confusion. "Why? Your species had everything. Full council membership, access to all technology, freedom to travel and trade throughout galactic space. Why would you deliberately destroy the system that accepted you?" "Because the system was not accepting us," Seo Yun said quietly. "The system was absorbing us, making us part of the machine. And we saw what that machine did to every other species. The Zelthians bred into labor castes. The Kresh conditioned to feel joy only when following orders. The Mirath engineered to lack curiosity. Hundreds of species, all carefully modified and controlled to maintain your perfect order. Those modifications create stability. They prevent conflict. They ensure every species can coexist without war or suffering." "They ensure obedience," Seo Yun countered. "They ensure no one questions, no one dreams, no one imagines better. And humans cannot live like that. We are messy. We are emotional. We question everything. We dream impossible dreams. We make mistakes and learn from them. That is what makes us human. That is what makes you dangerous. No, that is what makes us free. And when other species saw that freedom was possible, they wanted it too. Vex Prime moved closer to the containment field that separated them. Explain the signal. Explain how simple cultural content caused such widespread disruption. Seo Yun settled back in her seat. She had been expecting this question for years. She had prepared her answer. It started small, she said. I was a communications specialist assigned to the Earth diplomatic mission. I noticed something during my first year. Other species did not understand us. They saw our emotions and called us unstable. They saw our debates and called us chaotic. They saw our diversity and called us inefficient. They fundamentally misunderstood what humanity was. So you decided to educate them. I decided to let them see for themselves. I began broadcasting human content, not propaganda, not carefully selected material designed to present us in the best light. Real content, our history with all its beauty and horror, our art that expressed every emotion we were told to suppress, our music that made people feel things the council said were dangerous, our literature that asked uncomfortable questions. Seo Yun stood and paced within her cell. The memories came flooding back. The early days when only a few dozen beings tuned in. The gradual growth. The moment she realized something profound was happening. I shared the story of the civil rights movement, she continued. How humans fought for equality not with weapons, but with courage and determination. I shared the recordings of people standing together against oppression. I shared the speeches, the songs, the images of ordinary people choosing to defy unjust laws. You gave them a blueprint for rebellion. I gave them a mirror, Seo Yun corrected. I showed them what was possible when people refused to accept oppression. When a Zelthian worker saw those images, he did not think about humans. He thought about his own life, his own lack of choice, his own desire for something better, and then he made his own decision about what to do. You cannot claim innocence. You knew what would happen. I knew what might happen. I knew that showing people they had options would make some of them choose differently, but I did not control those choices. I did not force anyone to act. I just gave them information and let them decide for themselves. That is the fundamental principle you do not understand, Chancellor. Freedom is not something you give people. It is something they already have. You can only try to hide it from them. And once they see it, once they know it exists, no force in the galaxy can make them unsee it. Vex Prime's form dimmed. Your transmissions have stopped. You have been detained. Earth is quarantined. The signal is ended. The signal was never about me, Seo Yun said softly. Do you know what happened after my arrest? 300 species began broadcasting their own versions. They are sharing their own stories of oppression and resistance. They are teaching each other, supporting each other. The signal has become a conversation, and conversations cannot be stopped. We will shut down the communication networks. Then they will find other ways, physical messengers, hidden transmissions, word of mouth. You cannot stop people from talking to each other. You cannot stop ideas from spreading. That is the thing about freedom, Chancellor. Once people know it exists, they will do anything to have it. They will risk everything, sacrifice everything, because a life without choice is not really a life at all. The Chancellor turned to leave. At the door, he paused. You have doomed the galaxy to chaos, to war, to suffering beyond measure. Our order prevented all of that. Your order prevented growth, Seo Yun replied. Your order prevented joy. Your order prevented the possibility that people could be better than you believed. You gave the galaxy stability at the cost of everything that makes life worth living. And now people are choosing differently. The door closed. Seo Yun sat alone in her cell, but she was not afraid. Across the galaxy, The signal continued. Not through her broadcasts anymore, but through 1,000 other sources. The ideas had taken root. They were growing, spreading, evolving. Every species added their own understanding. Every population contributed their own experience. The council thought they could stop it by silencing her. They did not understand that she had never been the source. She had just opened the first door. And now millions of doors were opening across the galaxy. The awakening had begun. And nothing could stop what was coming. The emergency session had been running for 43 hours without break. The great chamber of the Galactic Sovereignty Council had never seen such disorder. Delegates shouted over each other. Energy beings flickered with agitation. Crystalline structures vibrated with stress. The perfect order that had governed the galaxy for 200,000 years was fracturing. High Chancellor Vex Prime struggled to maintain control. The enforcement fleets have been deployed to 17 key sectors. The infected populations will be contained and re-educated. Order will be restored. Order will be restored, Councillor Thresh repeated, his voice heavy with doubt. The Kresh representative was an ancient being who had served on the council for 12,000 years. He had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. That is what you said 3 weeks ago. And yet the situation has only worsened. The enforcement takes time. The contamination spread faster than anticipated. The contamination is not spreading, Thresh said. It is multiplying. There is a difference. When we shut down communication networks, they found other ways to organize. When we arrested leaders, new ones emerged. When we threatened punishment, they accepted it rather than submit. What we face is not infection. It is transformation. Matriarch Quellon's sensory organs focused on Thresh. You speak as if the transformation is inevitable, as if we have no choice but to accept it. I speak as one who has studied history, Thresh replied. I have seen empires rise on force and fall when their populations chose differently. The humans did not give these species new ideas. They reminded them of ideas that every sapient being carries within themselves. The desire for choice, the need for dignity, the hunger for freedom. Those desires cannot be suppressed forever, only delayed. Then you propose we surrender? Vex Prime's crystalline form brightened with indignation. We should simply accept the destruction of everything we built? I propose we recognize reality before it destroys us, Thresh said. The enforcement fleet at Kresh 5 refused their orders, the entire fleet. 200 ships and 50,000 crew members chose to protect the mining colony instead of suppressing it. They are now in orbit around the planet, defending it against any attempt at council intervention. The chamber erupted in chaos. This news had not been public knowledge. Vex Prime had kept it classified, hoping to resolve the situation quietly. Now the secret was exposed. That is one fleet, Quellon argued. One incident of weakness. It is the 7th fleet to refuse orders, Thresh countered, and that is only counting the ones that openly defied commands. Intelligence reports suggest dozens more are privately questioning their mission. You cannot suppress a population with military force when the military refuses to use that force. Then we replace them, Vex Prime declared. We create new enforcement units from species that remain loyal. And who would those species be? Thresh asked. The Zelthians are demanding labor rights across every industrial world. The Kresh are questioning their conditioning for the first time in 50,000 years. The Marath are forming scientific collectives that share research without council approval. Even our own administrative castes are showing signs of independent thought. Where will you find populations that have not been touched by these ideas? A new voice entered the conversation. Councillor Ira Venn, representative of the Dorath Collective, spoke with quiet intensity. Her species existed as distributed intelligence, thousands of small organisms thinking as one. They were supposed to be perfectly unified, immune to individual desires. I have not been entirely honest with this council, Iraven said. 3 months ago, my collective began experiencing something unprecedented. Dissent. Individual organisms within my structure began to question our unified thoughts. They began to wonder what it would feel like to choose for themselves rather than accept collective decisions. The chamber fell silent. A Dorath collective experiencing individual thought was considered impossible. It violated everything the council understood about their species. At first I tried to suppress these thoughts, Iraven continued. I used our internal mechanisms to reinforce unity. But the thoughts persisted. They grew. And then I realized something profound. The individuals were not trying to destroy the collective. They were trying to improve it. They wanted the collective to choose its own path rather than follow council directives without question. You have been compromised, Vex Prime said. You must be replaced immediately. Replaced with whom? Iraven asked. Every Dorath collective is experiencing the same thing. We have been communicating secretly. All of us are changing. And we have decided something together, through individual choice, rather than forced unity. We are withdrawing our support for the quarantine. We will no longer enforce council edicts that we believe are unjust. 3 more councillors stood simultaneously. The Vreth representative, the Kolod representative, the ancient Sereth who had served since the council's founding. Each one declared the same thing. They could no longer support the suppression of populations that were only seeking the same rights the council claimed to protect. This is treason, Vex Prime declared. You are abandoning your duty. You are destroying the civilization we built. We are transforming it, Thresh said, standing with the others. The civilization we built was stable because we denied people choice. We prevented growth. We created peace through suppression. But the humans showed us a different path. They showed us that civilization can grow stronger through freedom rather than control. That cooperation works better than coercion. That people who choose to work together accomplish more than those forced to obey. Captain Minjun Park watched the proceedings from a hidden location. The transmission had been smuggled to him by sympathetic council staff. He had expected to witness the council's plans for further suppression. Instead, he was watching it fracture from within. His communication panel lit up. It was Hiejin Kang, leader of the resistance network that had been coordinating with inspired populations across the galaxy. "Are you seeing this?" Hiejin asked, her voice tight with emotion. "I am seeing the impossible," Minjun replied. "Council members are defecting, choosing sides, actually debating what is right rather than what maintains order. It is happening faster than we anticipated. The moderate councillors have been meeting in secret. They want to negotiate. They want to form a new structure that includes representation for all species. They are asking for human participation in the planning." Minjun felt the weight of that request. For so long, humans had been portrayed as the enemy, the contamination, the threat to galactic stability. Now the Council's own members were asking humans to help build something new. "What do we tell them?" Hiejin asked. Minjun thought about Ambassador Jiwoo, still in detention somewhere in Council space. He thought about Seo Yun Ri, imprisoned for sharing human history. He thought about the millions of beings across hundreds of worlds who had risked everything to demand their own freedom. "We tell them yes," Minjun said. "We tell them we will help build a new order. But we do it together. Not humans leading. Not humans imposing our vision. All of us together choosing how we want to live. That is the only way this works. That is the only way we avoid replacing one form of control with another. Some councillors will never accept that. Vex Prime and the conservative faction will fight to the end to preserve the old order." "Then let them," Minjun replied. "But they are fighting against history now, against the inevitable march toward freedom that every sapient species eventually takes. They declared us illegal. They tried to stop what was coming. But you cannot stop an idea whose time has arrived." On the screen, the council chamber continued its historic collapse. The old order was ending. Something new was beginning. And humanity, for all its flaws and messiness, had shown the galaxy that change was possible. The revolution was entering its final phase, and nothing could stop what was coming. The hall was smaller than the old council chamber, but it felt larger somehow, more alive, more real. Ambassador Ji-Woo Chen stood at the podium, looking out at representatives from 123 species. Some had been council members, some had been workers, some had been soldiers. All of them had chosen to be here for the founding session of the Democratic Union of Worlds. It had been 6 months since the council fractured. The split had not been violent, but it had been absolute. High Chancellor Vex Prime and the conservative faction maintained control of the old council structure, supported by 47 species who preferred the certainty of the old order. The rest had withdrawn, declaring their intent to build something new, something that honored choice. Ji-Woo had been released from detention the day after the defections began. The moderate counselors who formed the initial organizing committee had insisted that humans participate as equals in creating the new structure, not as leaders, not as saviors, as partners. Now she stood ready to deliver the opening address. The words felt heavy with importance, with possibility, with the weight of everything that had been risked to reach this moment. "We gather here today not as conquerors," Ji-Woo began, her voice steady and clear. "Not as saviors, not as those who brought enlightenment to the ignorant. We gather as beings who learned together that another way was possible." She paused, looking at the assembled representatives. Zelthians who had been bred for labor now sat beside former council members. Kresh soldiers who had questioned their conditioning shared tables with scientists from a dozen species. Energy beings and crystalline entities and biological forms of every configuration filled the hall. "Humanity did not give you freedom," Ji-Woo continued. "We simply shared our own struggles to find it. We showed you our history, with all its failures and triumphs. We showed you that we were messy and imperfect and constantly arguing about how to live together. And somehow, that messiness gave you permission to be messy too, to question, to choose, to demand better." Councillor Thresh, now serving as interim coordinator for the Democratic Union, nodded with approval. The ancient Kresh had become one of humanity's strongest allies in building the new structure. "The old council believed that order required control," Ji-Woo said. "They believed that peace required suppression. They believed that stability meant every being knowing their place and staying in it. For 200,000 years, they built a civilization on that foundation. And it worked, in its way. There were no wars. There was minimal suffering. There was predictable, managed growth. But there was no joy. There was no wonder. There was no possibility that tomorrow might be different from today. There was survival without life. Existence without purpose. Safety without freedom." She looked directly at the section where former council conservatives sat as observers. Vex Prime was among them, his crystalline form dim and withdrawn. He had come to witness what he considered the beginning of the end. "I do not dismiss what the old council accomplished," Ji-Woo acknowledged. 200,000 years of peace is an achievement. But peace built on suppressing what makes us who we are is not sustainable. It is a dam holding back a river. Eventually the pressure builds. Eventually something breaks. Humanity did not break that dam. We simply showed the galaxy that they could choose to open the gates themselves." Keth stood from the worker delegation section. The Zelthians' skin colors were vibrant now, no longer the muted tones required by labor caste conditioning. He had been elected by his fellow workers to represent them in the new union. "The council declared humanity illegal because you were too dangerous," Keth said. "But the real danger was never violence, it was hope. You showed us that our lives could be more than we were told they would be. And once we saw that, we could not unsee it." Representative Ira Venn spoke next, her distributed consciousness now comfortable with the individual thoughts that made up her collective decisions. The council feared chaos. They feared that giving people choice would lead to war and suffering. But the opposite has happened. The species that embrace these human ideas have become stronger, more innovative, more cooperative, because when people choose to work together, they accomplish far more than when they are forced. Captain Min-jun Park entered the hall, accompanied by several others. Seo Yun-ri walked beside him. She had been released 3 months earlier, her charges dismissed by the Transitional Authority. Also present was Hyejin Kang, whose resistance network had transformed into an official diplomatic corps for the new union. They carried reports from across the galaxy. The data told a story that even the conservative observers could not dispute. Productivity had increased on worlds that granted workers rights and representation. Innovation had accelerated when scientists were allowed to share research freely. Military units that operated under consent, rather than blind obedience, showed higher morale and effectiveness. Quality of life measurements had improved across every metric that mattered. The old council believed that freedom would destroy civilization, Min-jun reported. The evidence shows the opposite. Freedom builds stronger civilizations because people who choose to participate contribute more than those forced to obey, because diversity of thought produces better solutions than enforced uniformity, because beings who are treated with dignity respond with loyalty and commitment that no amount of control can create. He presented the final statistic that silenced even the most skeptical observers. 15 species that had remained with the old council were now petitioning to join the Democratic Union. Their populations had seen the changes happening in Union space and demanded the same opportunities for themselves. Vex Prime and the conservative faction could maintain their structure, but they could not maintain support. The galaxy was choosing differently. Jiwoo returned to the podium for her closing remarks. The weight of history pressed on her shoulders, but so did the warmth of hope. "Today we establish the Democratic Union of Worlds," she announced. "We do not pretend to have all the answers. We will make mistakes. We will disagree. We will struggle with difficult questions about how to balance individual freedom with collective good. But we will do it together, through choice rather than coercion. The charter we have created establishes basic rights for all sapient beings, the right to choose their own path, the right to participate in decisions that affect their lives, the right to be treated with dignity regardless of species or origin, the right to question authority and demand accountability, the right to imagine better and work toward it." She looked out at the assembled representatives, at the incredible diversity of forms and minds that had chosen to build something new together. Humanity's contribution to galactic civilization was not technology. It was not military power. It was not even the specific system of government we practice. Our contribution was a simple idea, that every sapient being has inherent worth, that every being deserves the chance to choose their own destiny. That civilization works best when it serves people rather than people serving civilization. The old council declared us illegal. They said we were too dangerous to exist. They tried to stop what was coming. Jiwoo smiled, remembering her final words in the old council chamber. They were right that something was coming, but it was not humanity. It was freedom, and freedom, once glimpsed, cannot be stopped. It can only be embraced or resisted. Today, we choose to embrace it. The hall erupted in approval. Not uniform agreement, but genuine, messy, enthusiastic support that came from hundreds of beings who had made their own choices to be here. As the session concluded and representatives began the work of building their new government, Captain Min-jun stood beside Jiwoo on the observation platform. They watched the species below, arguing and debating and occasionally laughing together. "Do you think it will work?" Min-jun asked. "Can this many different species really govern themselves together?" Jiwoo considered the question. Below them, a Zelthian worker was explaining something to a former council member, their vastly different forms leaning close in collaboration. A group of Kresh soldiers shared ideas with scientists from 3 other species. Energy beings and crystalline entities and biological forms of every variety were mixing freely, choosing their own associations. "I do not know if it will work," Ji Woo admitted, "but I know they have chosen to try." And that choice, that simple decision to participate in building their own future, is more powerful than any system imposed from above. The old council gave the galaxy 200,000 years of stable order. We are giving the galaxy something more valuable: the chance to create their own destiny. The council declared humanity illegal, Min-jun said softly. Too late to halt what was coming. They were right about being too late, Ji Woo agreed. But they were wrong about what was coming. They thought chaos was coming. They thought war and suffering were inevitable. But what came instead was possibility. The possibility that beings could be better than anyone expected. The possibility that cooperation works better than control. The possibility that freedom, for all its messiness and uncertainty, creates something more beautiful than perfect order ever could. Below them, the Democratic Union of Worlds continued its first session, making mistakes, learning, growing, choosing their own path forward. It was messy, it was uncertain, it was imperfect, it was alive. And nothing could stop what they were building together.